because the people are confused about what they want. They want to reject God and have whatever impulse it is that they have. Thousands of years later, the cry of crucify him, would show that, again, not much has changed. So, we're given a king. Saul is anointed by Samuel for God to be king. He was selected because, he was good looking, he was attractive, he was strong, he was a manly man, he was a warrior. These are all good qualifiers for a ruler, right? That's how you select your kings? We're going to get into that in a minute. Ultimately, Saul was an arrogant, self-absorbed, rude king that ended up never liking to be wrong. Anybody have any friends like that? Does that sound familiar? It's a hard friend to be around. Replacing Saul is a man named David. David is humble. David is gentle. David is also a warrior. But David is a man after God's own heart. He seeks God, not men. And he cares about the people around him, no matter the situation. That, friend's a little harder to find. And the Lord has anointed all of this that we have. And now, as I assume you folks are in the Bible, I'm going to transition a little bit because I'm a dad, I'm a young dad, I'm a young man, and I really like comic books. So I imagine changing my title slide a little bit into what I imagine my comic book would be like. The man after God's own heart. That sounds like a good adventure story, right? Comic books right now are having a renaissance in movies. Everything is all about comic books. Wonder Woman came out just a few months ago. It's got rave reviews. I can't wait to go see it. Then you have the Marvel side, which includes 13 different movies all set in the same universe that all interconnect with each other. Nothing like that has ever been done before. So you get one very long, cohesive story with these characters interacting. And ultimately, these stories are led by two different fictional characters. You have, on the one side, Captain America, and on the other side, you have Tony Stark, who is Iron Man. And these two characters are kind of the leads of the comic book world. I don't know if you folks have seen these movies. You really should, because it's exciting and stuff blows up. That's really all I need to make it a good movie for me. But you have these two characters. Captain America as a character is going to be honest, humble, huge warrior, absolute brute strength, and infallibly has faith to a fault. Captain America, in this fictional world, is the guy who has actually met two gods. Fictional world. Actually met two gods. And tells people he still only believes in the one true God. That's an unshakable faith. Cannot get better faith than that. Iron Man is a man who's absolutely brilliant. Again, an absolute warrior. Kind of does things his own way. He knows the right way no matter what, and that's the way it's going to be, and he kind of implements the way he wants to do things. And I come to realize this is David and Saul. You have the man with the absolute unshakable faith in David and in Captain America, absolute brute strength. David grew up as a shepherd. Don't imagine that as a little hippie on a hill with a harp playing, making sure nobody jumps over the fence. No, this is out in the middle of nowhere, right? In the fields. And in the fields you have lions and bears and wolves that all want to eat your sheep for lunch every single day. And David has a stick. Oh no. And he's got a little slingshot with a couple stones and his bare hands. David is good at fending off lions and bears and wolves with a stick, a couple stones, and his bare hands. Faithful to God to a fault in absolutely everything. I can't tell the difference between Captain America and David. And Saul, kind of an arrogant, self-absorbed man who always knows the best way for everything to be done no matter what, is never wrong, and implements his way on everybody else. I can't tell the difference between Saul and Iron Man. So as a comic book fan, this really resonates with me. We're going to kind of draw parallels, learn a little bit between the two, but I want you to kind of see these two fictional characters in action with each other to understand it's basically the same relationship as David takes over for King Saul.
My teammates don't tell me this. Kind of open floor would be the exception.
We don't know what the Maximoff kid showed him.
Earth's mightiest heroes. pull this apart like cotton candy.
Seems like you walked away all right.
Is that a problem?
I don't trust a guy without a dark side. Call me old-fashioned.
Well, let's just say you haven't seen it yet.
You know Ultron's trying to tear us apart, right?
Well, I guess you know. Whether you tell us is a bit of a question.
They don't ever doing research.
That would affect the team.
That would end the team. Isn't that the mission? Isn't that the why we fight? So we can end the fight? So we get to go home?
Every time someone tries to win a war before it starts, innocent people die. Every time.
So we have two men fighting over the fate of what the best way to rule is. And we have very, very different ideas of what that is, that actually looks like. And Saul and David end up being absolutely no different. And every once in a while, Captain America needs to remind Iron Man what we're really doing here, and David does the same to Saul several times. So let's open up your Bible as we go. Eventually, the feud between Captain America and Iron Man leads to an all-out civil war with these characters. And again, the Bible story is going to be no different. We see the land of Israel being torn in two between the sides of David and the sides of Saul. So if you're in 1 Samuel, let's look at a few do's and don'ts of ways that we can become men and women after God's own heart. So the first one we need to not do not keep up appearances. Don't keep up your appearances. I'll have some of these Bible verses that we're going to go through and look at these up on the screen. So if you don't have your Bibles, feel free to follow along. But I want to look at several of these that we have. We're going to start in 1 Samuel 13 and start with verse 8. 1 Samuel 13 and 8. Remember, we have Saul, who is confident in his own abilities and everything that he can do. It says, Saul waited 7 days, the time appointed by Samuel. Samuel is supposed to arrive with the army and offer a sacrifice to God before the battle. Remember, Samuel is the prophet of God. His job is to provide the sacrifice. But Samuel did not come to Gilgal, and the people were scattered from him. So Saul says, bring the burnt offering here to me and the peace offerings. And Saul, he offered the burnt offering. As soon as he had finished offering the burnt offering, behold, Samuel came. And Samuel went to meet him and greet him. Samuel said, what have you done? And Saul said, when I saw that the people were scattering from me, and that you did not come within the day appointed, and that the Philistines had mustered at Michmash, I said, now the Philistines will come down against me at Gilgal, and I have not sought the favor of the Lord. So I forced myself. You hear that in his voice to Samuel, who actually spoke to us? I forced myself and offered the burnt offering. And Samuel said to Saul, you have done foolishly. You have not kept the command of the Lord your God with which he commanded you. For then the Lord would have established your kingdom over Israel forever. But now your kingdom shall not continue. The Lord has sought out a man after his own heart, and the Lord has commanded him to be prince over his people, because you have not kept what the Lord commanded you. As we go on, I'm going to try to present the case that Saul is a man who does not actually know the Lord. Saul is a man who does not have a relationship with the Lord. Saul doesn't truly have faith in the Lord. You'd think that as the first king over God's people, that might be a qualification that you look at. Doesn't end up being the case, and we'll go over this as we go. Ultimately, Saul is worried about his appearances. See, because the people are scattering, he's worried the enemy's coming, and no one's offered the sacrifice to God. Now, Saul knows that Samuel is the one who gives the offering to God. But in order to rally his people and to give the people what the people expect, Saul does it himself. Because he doesn't have faith that God will ultimately save them. It's like, oh no, God's late. God is never late. And he goes and takes this upon himself in order to do things. Now David, conversely, flip over to 2 Samuel. We'll look at David in the same situation. It's amazing. We're going to see that Saul and David have the same situations, and the way they react is very, very different from each other. So David in 2 Samuel chapter 3, ultimately, David takes an enemy into his camp and turns him into a friend. So he has made a partnership with his former enemies, which is really the best way to defeat an enemy, is to turn them into a friend. And as that commander is leaving, one of David's commanders disagrees and kills the man that we've just turned into our friend. Saul's reaction to this might be to cover it up. Look, we did a good thing. This man was our enemy. Let's go off and cover up what actually happened in order to make me look good and so that I didn't make a mistake. David's reaction is quite different. And we start in 2 Samuel chapter 3 with verse 31. We have, and David said to Joab and all the people who were with him, "Tear your clothes and put on sackcloth and mourn before Abner." Remember, Saul is self-absorbed and arrogant. Can you ever imagine him humbling himself in this type of way, especially in front of others? And King David followed the bier. They buried Abner, is the man that we killed, at Hebron. And the king lifted up his voice and wept at the grave of Abner, and all the people wept. And the king of Abner, they lamented for the king of Abner, saying, "Should Abner die as a fool dies? Your hands were not bound, your feet were not fettered. As one before the wicked falls, is how it is that you have fallen." And the people wept over him again. And I will get to my place really quickly here because there's two other verses that I want to make sure that we cover. The following two verses say, "Then all the people came to persuade David to eat bread while it was yet day. But David swore, saying, 'God do so to me and more also if I taste bread or anything else till the sun goes down.'" This is for his enemy. "And all the people took notice of it. This was not done in secret. And it pleased them as everything that the king did pleased the Lord." In two different situations that require humility and trust in God, Saul covers things up and does things his own way. David bows before the Lord, humbles himself, and brings other people to do the same because it's the right way to go. And it's the correct way to do things. In front of the people, Saul pressed his clothes. Saul wanted to look good. He wanted to look nice. He wanted to look the part. Whereas in the front of the people, David tore his clothes. Do you see the difference? Humility, trust in God, one that one has that the other does not. There's a movie that we watched with our previous church. It's called To Save a Life. It's the story of a young teenager who's not a believer and gets brought into a church by friends. It takes a lot of convincing to actually get there, but he finally goes to see what this God person is all about. And when he gets there, the church service is all about socializing, playing games, talking to each other, being a community of people, but not being a community of God. They'd take the lesson and everybody would talk through it because they cared more about their conversations and the apps on their phone than they did about God. And he stands up in the middle of this service and said, "What's the point? Why do you come here and open up the Bible if you don't let it change you? What's the point of opening up your Bible and being here if you're not going to let it change you?" David has let the Lord change him. Saul has not. Do not keep up your appearances. What I do want you to do is I do want you to take responsibility. Take responsibility. Saul is in a battle with the Amalekites. The Lord has told him to go and attack the Amalekites because of the oppression they gave to Israel when they were fleeing Egypt during the Exodus. And now God is going to punish those who oppressed Israel. So he sends Saul out to the Amalekites and he tells them, destroy them, not defeat them, destroy them, wipe them off the face of the planet. God tells them, destroy every man, woman, child, animal, beast, and everything. Do not take a spoil, burn it to the ground. This is punishment for going against God's people and God's will. And Saul is the one to enact it. And we see that he does that in 1 Samuel. I told you to keep your thumb. A couple chapters later, we're going to be in chapter 15. See, because Saul goes out into battle against the Amalekites, does defeat them, and then takes the king prisoner to bring back to Israel, and has an awful lot of sheep and oxen and donkeys with him. Samuel hears about this from the Lord. Samuel's not happy. God is not happy. Because they were told to destroy absolutely everything, and Saul has not done that. Saul has taken the command of the Lord and completely tossed it aside. Samuel goes out to meet with Saul, and he hears on the way that in a town a little bit further away called Carmel, Saul has built a statue of himself in celebration of the battle. See, because when Saul is in front of his people, this is about me. This is about me and my victory and my greatness. Now, when Samuel gets there, the tone changes a little bit, and we're suddenly all about the Lord. It's an amazing transformation that happens just like that. And Samuel says, "That's great. What happened?" Saul meets him and specifically says, "Blessed be the Lord, blessed be you to the Lord." Saul says, "I have performed the commandment of the Lord." Excuse me? Did you hear a different word than I heard from the Lord? Now Saul is a man who sees Samuel doing all of these great things and is told by Samuel what the Lord says. Saul has an understanding to make sure to honor Samuel. I do believe that Saul believes in the power of Samuel and wants to keep up appearances with Samuel. "I have performed the commandment of the Lord." And Samuel says, "That's great. Who's that with you?" For those of you who are fathers, have you ever found your kid standing on a stool, sitting on top of a chair, so they can reach the top of the counter and steal the cookie they weren't supposed to have before lunch? How does that conversation go? You weren't supposed to do that. What are you doing? Now the smart kid, and I know this because I was, unfortunately for my parents, a really smart kid. I would get up on the counter, literally get my hand caught in the cookie jar and say, "Oh, Mommy, look, I was getting you a cookie." No, this isn't for me. No, this is for you. That's 4-year-old Steve, okay? Because that's what a 4-year-old does. This is also literally what the king of Israel anointed by God does, just as a comparison of where exactly we're at. You see, because Saul said they brought them from the Amalekites, for the people spared the best of the sheep and the oxen to sacrifice to the Lord your God. We weren't taking spoils. This is for you. Literally, the kid caught with his hand in the cookie jar. And the rest we've devoted to destruction. Then Samuel said to Saul, "Stop." Because when your kid gets so big into lies, just stop. Don't dig the hole any further. Just stop. Actually, what Samuel says to Saul the king, "I will tell you what the Lord told to me this night." And as he goes on, he tells Saul about the evil that he's done in his own heart. And Saul knows that he's been caught. And what does Saul do? Saul takes the natural way out. Look at what he has said here. He said, "I've sinned, for I've transgressed the commandment of the Lord in your words." Remember, previously he talked about the Lord, your God. And now we have your words. "Because I feared the people and obeyed their voice." Someone needs to remind Saul he is the king. Okay, he doesn't have an election cycle coming up. You are the king. You are anointed by God to do God's work. And in a move dating all the way back to the first 2 human beings on earth, they made me do it. They made me do it. It wasn't me. "Now therefore, please pardon my sin and return with me that I may bow before the Lord." Remember, Saul is all about keeping up the appearances. He wants Samuel to go home with them, because if the 2 of them go back together, arm in arm, hand over their shoulder, nothing's wrong. Right? This is what Saul wants. This is what Saul wants. Samuel's response to him is where we get the term in verse 24, "To obey is better than to sacrifice." Obeying the Lord is better than making the mistakes and sacrificing later. And then we end up with what Samuel said to Saul, "I will not return with you, for you have rejected the word of the Lord, and the Lord has rejected you from being king over Israel." It's not something a king wants to hear. As Samuel turned to go away, Saul seized the skirt of his robe and it tore, literally grabbed his shirt and said, "No, we're going together. Please, let me keep up appearances." This is what he wants. Saul feared the people. David, on the other hand, in the presence of his court and his company, when bad things happen, he tears his robes in part, wears nothing but sackcloth and humbles himself. When things go wrong, he's not trying to cover it up. He is going through and taking the responsibility for what it is that happened. David meets a woman called Bathsheba. Some of you understand this story. Bathsheba was a beautiful woman who David could see from his throne room, who was married to one of the people in his army. David loves this woman physically. And when she becomes pregnant, David sends her husband to the front lines of the fiercest battle so that he will die. So that David can marry the now widowed woman and have the child. David is rebuked and caught by the prophet Nathan, who tells him, this is not what you're supposed to be doing. Samuel brought the sin of Saul to him, and he said, they made me do it. Let's go back and be buddies. David makes an error. The prophet Nathan comes to him and said, this is not the way it's supposed to be done. This is not what you need to do. And he specifically tells him, Saul asking for honor. And he tells him, behold, I will raise up evil against you out of your own house. This is to David. And I will take your wives before your eyes and give them to your neighbor, and he shall lie with your wives in the sight of the sun. For you did it secretly, but I will do this thing before all Israel and before the sun. Saul would say, no, please don't. Let's go back and be friends. I'm sorry. David says to Nathan, I have sinned against the Lord. Period. End quote. I did do that. This is my responsibility. I will face the consequences of my actions. We have a very same situation, exact same situation. David takes the responsibility. Be a man after God's own heart. Take the responsibility in everything that it is that we do. You see, because when Saul is defending, David is repenting. Stark difference between the two. Saul is defending, David is repenting. Taking responsibility is difficult to do. It's humbling to do. It's not something I enjoy doing. If you don't humble yourself before the Lord, often He will humble you in front of others. I'll tell you that from experience. Often He will humble you in front of others. See, when we take responsibility for the Lord and come to Him, that's what the Lord wants. He wants a relationship with us. He doesn't want to cover things up. You're not going to cover things up from the Lord God, who knows every thought that's ever gone through your head. When I'm discipling someone, I don't care what it is they've done. I don't care where they're at in their life. Because the story of us as Christians is not, hear me well on this, the story of us as Christians is not, where are you? The question of us as Christians is, how far have you come? It's because we start in very, very different lots in life. I was the third generation of our family to go to church. We went to church, all generations together. I started going to church in the nursery 9 months before I was born, raised in this church. I started a very different place than someone who is out on the street who has lived in their 30s or 40s before they've had a relationship with God. If we're the same age, I don't expect us to be in the same place. But I do want to see where you started and where you've come. And I don't care where that is. I care that there's progress because you've absolutely followed the Lord. And in order to do that, we need to humble ourselves. Because I'm far from perfect. But sometimes in this building, we like to show that we're perfect. And put up an appearance and a false front. Because that's what the people around us expect. Because we like to keep up appearances instead of taking that responsibility for what we do. And Mark Hall, the lead singer of Casting Crowns, says that he used to do this and he felt like he robbed himself of the ability to do ministry with others. Because someone right next to him is going through the same thing that he struggled with as a kid. And since he didn't feel like he felt like he couldn't bring it up, he was not able to minister to the young man sitting right next to him. And he says this about the world and the appearances to us. He says it doesn't bother the world that we sin. It bothers the world that we act like we don't. Ponder that just for a moment inside your own head. It doesn't bother the world that we sin. It bothers the world that we act like we don't. If we are to show Jesus to people, I need to show people where I started and how far I've come. I don't care about showing them where I am. They're not going to become a Christian and be at where I am. I need to show them where I started and the journey that Jesus took me through his grace in order to get where I actually am, and it's the journey. Another do not become jealous of others. Don't become jealous of others. See, the problem that Saul now has is Saul knows that David is going to replace him. Saul has been told that David is the man who's going to replace him. And in 1 Samuel, thumb back over, chapter 18, we see that Saul has David in his throne room, and the king throws a spear at his head. Don't be jealous of what other people have or are going to have. This is not a one-time incident. If you flip forward a little bit, in chapter 19, verse 1, he did it again. David was saved by Jonathan, the son of Saul. Didn't see that coming. He did it again in 19, verse 10, and then he did it again in 19, verse 11. This time he's saved by Michal, the daughter of Saul. Didn't see that one coming. See, because it's not just the nation of Israel that's being torn apart into these two factions, it's families. And then it happens in 1919 4 more times. Saul is so jealous over what David will have and that he will lose that he wants to take him out, because Saul doesn't understand the power of God. Doesn't understand that there's a relationship with God. This is the eternal, almighty, sovereign God who can do anything that he wants, that brought us here into existence by telling us to exist. He doesn't understand the power of God. He thinks if I take out David, that I get to be king. Sorry, Saul, when you get into a battle against the Lord, you're not going to win. Instead of seeking Saul, God looks to destroy others. David builds other folks up. Do you see the difference? We have in chapter 22, verse 19, Saul is pursuing David. David is on the run at this point. Imagine a dozen attempts on his life might do that to you. David's running. He goes through and he goes to the town of Nob and is helped by a priest. Saul chases after him, goes to Nob, finds him, and he puts the city of priests to the sword. Men, women, children, animals. Nothing is left standing because Saul is after David and these people helped him. Do you remember the previous verse that we looked at? Saul was commanded to go destroy absolutely everything, and he kept the spoil because he wanted some for himself. This was a mission of God, and he wanted it for himself. Now that we're on a mission of Saul, we finally have the total destruction. Saul is about himself. Saul is about destroying the man who God has appointed to take over for him. Building the case that Saul is self-absorbed, does not have that relationship with God. And this is the way that he sees it. So, and then we have the tipping point that comes out in chapter 23. They catch up with David. They're told he is here in Ziph, is the name of the town where they find him. And in verse 20 it says, "Now come down, O king, according to all your heart's desire to come down, and our part shall be to surrender him to the king's hand." The people of the town are going to give David to Saul, the man who doesn't take responsibility, the man who likes to keep up appearances, the man who is jealous of everything that David has. And a man fitting that exact description is going to reply to these people, "May you be blessed by the Lord." Really? Saul is using the name of the Lord to further his own agenda that has nothing to do with God. This is a man without a relationship with God. And we have chapter 24. They meet. Saul has actually wandered into the cave that David is hiding in. And much like I do after I drink too much water, Saul needed some privacy to take care of some business. And he walks into the cave David is in. I mean, imagine handing your enemy to you. You don't get a better chance than that. And David spares him, Because David says, one, this is not the way that God does things. Two, despite the fact he's my enemy, I know I'm replacing him, and he's evil and lying and doesn't have a relationship with God, he is still God's anointed, and I will not kill someone who's anointed by God, even though that man is trying to kill me. And he meets, and in front of the people he says, "My Lord the King." And when Saul looked behind him, David bowed with his face to the earth towards the man that's trying to kill him and pays him his homage. David said to Saul, "Why do you listen to the words of men who say, 'Behold, behold, this day your eyes have seen, now the Lord gave you today into my hand in the cave'? I had you. I had you. And some told me to kill you, but I spared you. I said, I will not put out my hand against my Lord, for he is the Lord's anointed." Suddenly, Saul realizes why David is replacing him. He says, "See, my father, see the corner of your robe in my hand? Proves it. For by the fact that I cut off the corner of your robe and did not kill you, you may see there's no wrong in me, no treason in my hand." This is in front of all of Saul's people who believe they're on a righteous mission to take out David. "I have not sinned against you, though you hunt my life to take it." Saul understands suddenly why David is replacing him. Saul replies to David and says to David, "You are more righteous than I, for you have repaid me good, whereas I have repaid you evil. And you have declared this day how you have dealt well with me, and that you did not kill me when the Lord put me into your hands." Is this Saul being humble? Is this Saul, the great man in front of all of his cabinet, actually showing humility? For if a man finds his enemy, will he let him go away safe? Verse 20, "I know that you shall surely be king, and that the kingdom of Israel shall be established in your hand." Saul is humble. That's amazing. "Swear to me, therefore, by the Lord, that you will not cut off my offspring after me, and that you will not destroy my name out of my father's house." Oh, wait, no. We're not humble. We're accepting the inevitable and saving face. Because even at the end, the only thing that I care about is my family's honor, my name, my appearance before the people, and how I will go down in history. Even when faced with this, Saul still can't show humility. Now in our lives, we have this little guy. This dude's name is Sebastian. He's 3 years old. He is exactly 1 year older than Ben, and he lives in Bolivia. Sebastian is our compassion child. We work with Compassion International in order to sponsor Sebastian. That provides to him food, medical attention, gives him church so that he gets to learn about God, gives him an education, supports his single mother who's raising him. And we want to support that, and we specifically wanted to pick someone that was Ben's age, so as they grow, they're growing together. And we're hoping that they'll write to each other and be pen pals and share stories back and forth. And ultimately, the help that Sebastian is getting is coming from his local church. Now, we'll never actually meet. We'll talk back and forth a few times. And I want Ben to share with Sebastian where it is that they've come, where he started and where he's come. I want Sebastian to share with my kid where he was at and where he's come. And I want them to share how the Lord has each helped them in their journey. It's not just about having Ben be appreciative for what he has. It's about showing the journeys of the Lord. Now, stories like this and several others that all of you do show ministry to others through the church and show the love of Jesus to others in the church, to people that we will never meet. So these type of stories are absolutely not stories about look at me, look at what I've done. I'm not sharing this so that you'll look at me and look at what I've done. I'm sharing this so that we will all continue to do this. And the response is instead, look at what he has done. Look at what he has done. Look at what God has done. Don't look at me. When you see me, look up. Look at what God has done. So don't become jealous of others. See, Saul is willing to kill a man who's been chosen by God. And David is not. Don't be jealous of others. Don't let your life say, look at me. Let your life say, look at him. May that be the desire of our heart. That is what David wants to do. David is a man after God's own heart. That's what we ought to be doing. And then the last do hope in the Lord. The final piece, one that obviously at this point Saul does not have, that David does have. At this point, again, they've all gone on their own journeys. They've met and intersected, and we've seen that David and Saul have had the exact same situations and reacted very differently to each of them. And they'll ultimately have this as the end. See, because Saul is a dad, Saul has several sons, the three oldest of which are in battle with him and do extremely good in battle. They are warriors. They are fierce, they are feared, and they are mighty. One of Saul's sons, Jonathan, became David's best friend, to the point that it says their souls were knit together. Have you had a friend like that? Jonathan is Saul's son. And in the final battles, the Lord has left Saul, and they're on a losing battle. Saul, from his point in the battlefield, watches as 1, 2, 3 sons die in battle to his enemies in front of him. Saul loses absolutely all hope, and with his armor-bearer by his side, falls on his own sword and takes his own life. Saul has no hope. He's seen his kingdom fall. He's seen it being taken away. He's seen himself being stripped of his power. He's seen himself lose the battles that he used to win, and now he has seen his sons fall in front of him. He has no hope, and he takes his own life. It's tragic. I can't even fathom. Saul said to his armor-bearer, "Draw your sword and thrust me through, because I don't want others to mistreat me. Even in death, I don't want the appearance of bad coming to me." His armor-bearer would not, for he feared greatly. Therefore Saul took his own sword and fell upon it. And when his armor-bearer saw it, he did the same. And Saul died, and his 3 sons, and his armor-bearer, and all of his men, all on the same day together. David's faith, however, is absolutely unshakable. Absolutely unshakable. David had this situation with Bathsheba. Remember the consequence? He said, "I did it. I take responsibility for what I've done, period, end quote. This is me. The punishment that the Lord has decided is for me, I will take because I deserve it. And I know that what the Lord does is good." David asks in 2 Samuel 5:19, "Lord, will you win this battle?" It's not about will I win the battle. Will you win the battle? It's not a show for the troops like Saul had. David knows that the victory lies with the Lord. David's response to the promises of greatness is in chapter 7, verse 18 of his 2 Samuel. He says, "Who am I?" David says, "Who am I, O Lord God, and what is my house that you brought me this far? Therefore, you are great." God, I'm not great. You are great. "For there is none like you, and there is no God beside you, according to all that we've heard with our ears." And David faces the punishment for his transgression with Bathsheba. David's son that was born to her becomes very sick. David stays by his side on the ground, won't eat, won't sleep, won't get up. And after 7 days of misery, like I can't even fathom as a parent, David's son dies. Imagine that, fathers. After 7 days of that, what is your response? David's response is to stand up, wash for the first time in a week, get dressed, have a meal, and go worship the Lord. I'm not sure that would be my response. Didn't quite see that one coming. The priests around him, who were afraid to tell him that his son had died, were like, "What happened?" Well, I'm kind of scared to ask, but what are you doing? David said, "My son was terribly sick, and I hate that he was sick. And I mourned for him and cried over him and cried out to the Lord for him. Now, my son's not sick anymore." He's not coming back to me, but ultimately I'm going back to him. That is the faith of a man who believes in his God. David stops mourning because he knows where his son has ended up and that he's going to end up seeing him one day. For the sake of time, I'm going to skip past the story. Saul knows that his sons are going to die and doesn't have hope. The difference with David, David knows that his son lives. David knows that his son lives. And your last blank, my hope lies in, and I've left this blank. And as a man who's not going to look over your papers when you leave, I want you to ponder this question. What is your faith in? Do you come to church to socialize, or are we here for the Lord? Do you care more about your money in the football game than you do about God? Where does your hope actually lie? Do you have the ability to stop mourning when the family member who's sick dies because you know they're celebrating and dancing in heaven today? That's a faith like I can't even imagine. My hope is found in Jesus. See, because the Bible says that all have sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. The Bible says that the wages of that sin is death. And the Bible says that Jesus came and lived a perfect life. Jesus became the high priest and the perfect sacrifice to the Lord for my sin. The Bible teaches that those who believe in Jesus as that sacrifice, he will take your sin on himself. And you will get to live with the Lord in heaven forever in paradise. Not because of what you've done, but because of your faith in the Lord that you have for him to save you. And Jesus ultimately meets the woman in the well who has sinned with adultery. And when no one else is fit to judge her except for Jesus, he says, neither do I condemn you. He tells her, go and sin no more. Because it's not about where you are, not where you pretend to be here in this building, but where you actually are. It's a matter of where you've come. Do you have that faith in the Lord? Share Jesus. One of the great honors of my life, I was able to be with my grandfather as he was passing. I grew up with my grandfather, loved him, but we never talked about Jesus. Never really knew where he lay. And when we got to the point about Jesus, he always wanted to change the subject. And as he was nearing the end, we brought it up to him, and we wouldn't let him change the subject. And after pushing him for a while, he finally broke down in tears, and we prayed together for Jesus to save him from what it is that he had done wrong. The next day, my grandfather lost the ability to speak. And the day after that, he passed. And I have a hope that I will see him again, because my faith in Jesus has allowed me to share it with other people. That I have the cure to death. I know what it is. How much do you have to hate someone to know the cure to death and not share it with someone who's going to die? Take this passion of Jesus. Have your life be, look at him. Look at Jesus. Look at everything it is that Jesus has done. See, Jesus, a man who was born 12 generations later, lived and died so that you can live again. I was a little late delivering these slides to Dan. I was working on it on Tuesday night, and as I'm there at my table, Ben comes up, and I can hear him over my laptop saying, uh-oh, uh-oh, and when a 2-year-old is running through the house yelling, uh-oh, that's not good. And he comes up, and I can see in one hand, he has an empty cup, and in the other hand, he has a lid. I realize I filled this up for you 30 seconds ago. That's not good. And he has decided, oh, look, I can open the container. Oh, look. And we have, in our house, we have tile floors because it's easy to clean up because we know this is happening. And Ben apparently knows this, so he's decided to dump it on the couch cushions. All of it. And my son is not perfect. I don't expect him to be perfect. I expect when he does things wrong that he runs to his Father to fix it and to help him and to love him. God is a Father like that on this Father's Day. He doesn't expect you to be perfect. He knows that you're not going to be perfect, so don't pretend. God is a Father who, when you mess up, come in and say, uh-oh, uh-oh. Come home. Come to your Father. Be a man after God's own heart. Because ultimately it's not about where you are, because we're all going to, as Christians, we're going to end up at the same place. It's about your journey. And I pray that your journey will be with the Lord. Let's pray. God, we thank you so much for this word about Saul and about David, and I pray that